Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Jesse. I'm going to be talking about the quick two-game series that the Orioles played against the Washington Nationals, in which they were able to split the series at a game apiece. So I'm going to be talking about that. The Orioles were fortunate to not get swept this series, which has particular significance for this Orioles team, which I will get into. And I'm basically just going to talk about each of the two games that happened, some takeaways from it, and what we can learn from it. So before I get into the series, I just want to say that Bet Online is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, NHL playoff stats, all the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. You can get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. You can head to the website or use your mobile device to participate and get in on the action. And Bet Online is where the game starts. All right. So, talking about game one first, game one was just sort of a very dead game. It was not exciting. The Orioles ended up losing the game 3-0. They were only able to manage getting three hits the entire game, each from Rutschman, Westberg, and Mullins. Trevor Williams was the starting pitcher for the Washington Nationals. He had a nice game. He didn't go deep, but the Washington Nationals exhibited their nice bullpen, and they gave up basically nothing offensively to the Orioles for the whole game. It was frustrating to watch from an offensive perspective, and it was a tough game. It was just tough all around. Corbin Burns pitched decent enough. He went 6 1/3. He gave up 3 runs. He hasn't yet given up more than 3 runs the entire season, or at a bare minimum, at least 3 earned runs. But I think it's just 3 runs, like that's it. But at a bare minimum, it's 3 earned runs the entire season. Um, yeah, and once again, the Orioles did not get much run support for Corbin Burns, and Burns had to take a tough loss. Trevor Williams ended up getting the win. Burns got the loss, um, despite having a pretty decent start in the game. In the second inning, Joey Meneses singled to drive in Jesse Winker. And then in the seventh, Eddie Rosario singled to score Joey Meneses. And then later, Trey Lipscomb singled to drive in Rosario. And then after the Lipscomb single is when Hyde went to go get Corbin Burns. Jacob Webb and Keegan Aiken came in afterwards, didn't allow anything. And yeah, that was basically it. There's not a lot to say about that game other than the offense just did not get anything going. It was just a frustrating game to watch. It was, and it did turn out to be a big game for the Washington Nationals, as it was the first time that they have been over 500 since July 1st, 2021, which is a long time. So for this Nationals team, it is probably something that they should be celebrating. I think it is emblematic sort of a bit of a turnaround that this team will experience. There were comparisons made throughout this series between the Orioles and the Nationals. The Nationals have sort of been in rebuild mode for a while now, and they've started to accumulate some talent. They have some core pieces that should be able to be there and hopefully, hopefully for them at least, create some long-term success. Yeah, and this game one win for the Nationals might be sort of symbolic of more positive things for them to come, maybe even this year. But I think it's fair to expect at a bare minimum within the next couple years. So But yeah, the Nationals had a nice game from their perspective. Getting 3 runs off Corbin Burns is just about as good as you're going to do. And then their pitching was great in that game. So it was a very frustrating first game for the Orioles. The Orioles were able to sort of put that behind them in game 2. Although offensively, we did sort of carry over a little bit of the game 1 offense, at least in the early part of the game. But so in the second game, the Orioles were able to win 7-6 in extra innings. Kyle Bradish started the game for us. He was sort of in and out of trouble early in the game, but he was able to go 5 innings, just allowed 1 run. His pitch count did get up early in the game, and he ended up only going 5. But his first and only 3 up 3 down inning came in the final inning that he pitched in the 5th. He had 9 strikeouts, so he did look good overall, but he did have to labor a bit. It was like a hot night out. He was clearly sweating a lot. The conditions probably weren't ideal, or probably more as much humid as it was hot. So obviously, I think the humidity plays a big role in how much these starting pitchers have to labor out there. So yeah, he looked stronger later. He was able to escape trouble, limit damage. Like I said, he only gave up the 1 run. So the results on paper are decent. If Hyde really wanted to push him, he could have probably thrown him out there for the 6th. I think his pitch count was in the 80s after 5. So he probably could have gone 1 more if needed, but no reason to do that at that point, especially in his progression back into regular starting pitching for the Orioles in the major leagues. So the O's went down, basically went down 1 run early in the game, but Santander tied it in the 4th inning with a home run from the right side. Henderson later put the Orioles ahead with a solo shot in the 6th inning. And that was a big home run for Gunnar Henderson. He's now tied for second in Major League home runs. He's tied with Shohei Ohtani, Kyle Tucker, and Teoscar Hernandez. Very impressive group of hitters there. And behind Marcell Ozuna, who has 12 home runs, all the 3, including Henderson that I mentioned, have 11. And then in the 6th, I'm sorry, so in the 7th, the O's tacked on a run. Jordan Westberg hit a double. Jorge Mateo put down a sufficient sacrifice bunt. The Orioles were up 2-1 at that point, just trying to add insurance runs. And we have a runner at second with no outs, Mateo up, so a sacrifice bunt seemed in order. It was, like I said, it wasn't a fantastic bunt, but it was good enough. It was sufficient. And then Westberg went to third, and Cowser was able to hit a sac fly to drive him in. So the O's were up 3-1. And at this point, it'd been a rather calm game. The Orioles carried through the 8th inning. The Orioles maintained their 3-1 lead. And offensively, things had been pretty calm, honestly, between both teams up until this point in the series. And at this moment, when the 9th inning begins, pandemonium sort of breaks out and offense starts flying all over the place. So we get to the 9th inning, and Kimbrel comes in, and it was, again, a rather frustrating moment to watch for him. He easily got the first 2 outs. The second out did come on a somewhat decently hit line drive, but 2 easy outs to start the inning. And then he gave up a solo home run to Eddie Rosario to make it 3-2. After that, he then walked Trey Lipscomb. So at this point, I think based upon just how I'm thinking about this situation, Kimbrel has not been doing well. He's not been pitching well. He's had moments where he's been good, but overall, the past couple of weeks have not been good to him. So after this Trey Lipscomb walk, um, and the Nationals basically bring the winning run up to the plate, at that point, I think that I would have gone to the bullpen to get Albert Suarez to come into that game. Now, Albert Suarez, I mean, we know basically his experience. He just got moved to the bullpen very, very recently. But in that situation, basically, uh, given that Albert Suarez, he's looked really good out of the bullpen. He looked good when he was starting. I think it would have been a good moment for him to have entered the game. Arguably, you could say that, well, he's not a closer. Of course, there's a lot of talk about how the ninth inning is just different for certain people, and we don't know if Albert Suarez could handle that potentially. Um, are From what we've seen, he seemed to have been able to handle his nerves very, very well in the early going. So I wouldn't have minded having seen Albert Suarez come into the game at that point. I also like the idea of bringing a reliever into the game when there is the runner on first base and the tying run is not yet in scoring position. And if the reliever comes in, they're sort of getting acquainted into the game. They give up a single. Well, they haven't blown the lead yet. So, but when you bring, as what happened in the game, you bring the following reliever in with no margin for error, then it becomes a more difficult situation, right? So, as what happened now, and what I'm saying, sort of kind of did not apply to the game because I was saying to bring a reliever in at that point after the first walk. But what ended up happening is they pinch ran for Lipscomb and then he immediately stole second. So in that sort of situation, now, of course, Kimbrel does not hold runners well. He's notorious for that. So maybe, of course, things would have been different if a different reliever had come in. But I guess all I'm trying to say is the the idea of not having any margin for error doesn't apply if the runner immediately steals second. Anyway, all that to say, I would have gone to Suarez. I think in that situation, there's a very good case to be made to bring in Keegan Aiken as well, which the Orioles and Brandon Hyde ended up doing a batter later. Um, just because at this point, we're sort of to some extent doing a little bit of a closer by committee here now that Kimbrel has been struggling a bit. And Keegan Aiken sort of has the hot hand right now. He's basically equally as effective against lefties and righties. Um, so I think regardless of who you go to from the pen, I think it would have been great to have done it after the first walk, after the winning run comes up to the plate, rather than allowing the tying run to get in scoring position as what happened in the game. So basically Jacob Young was coming up, and then Craig Kimbrel walked him too. That's the moment. That's the at bat with Jacob Young coming up, where I would have gone to the pen at that point. And after Jacob Young is walked, there are runners on second and first and second with two outs. Keegan Aiken comes in to relieve Craig Kimbrel. And this is it's not completely odd, but in terms of the lefty matchup, you could just sort of throw that out the window right here. As I said, basically Keegan Aiken is roughly equally as effective so far this year against lefties and righties. And CJ Abrams, although he is a lefty hitter, He has noticeable reverse splits. He has an OPS this year over 1,000 against lefties, and still has a very good OPS against righties at 791. So the move sort of, in some sense, defied basic logic. You're not bringing Keegan Aiken in for the matchup. You couldn't have been in that situation. It had to just be a situation where he was your best arm. I'm sure that Hyde was maybe caught in the middle of trying to get Craig Kimbrell the save, and as he said after the game, trying to sort of get him back on track and fix him. But I don't think we should be allowing Craig Kimbrell to have a long leash at this point, especially given how he's recently done, how he pitched in this game. Eli made a comment on our Twitter about how I think at this point there's sort of two options for Craig Kimbrell. Either you put him on the IL and let him heal if there is an actual injury, or you bring him in lower pressure situations in the seventh or eighth innings and try to sort him out there. I don't think that it makes sense to just keep throwing him in the ninth inning and then predictably have him continue to either blow saves or in this case jeopardize severely the Orioles' chances of winning. So in any case, although Kimbrell did not blow the save, he positioned the Orioles and positioned the reliever that followed him to blow the save, which is exactly what Keegan Aiken did. CJ Abrams, as I mentioned, he had the reverse splits, and then he ended up singling to tie the game at 3-3. Keegan Aiken blew the save. Craig Kimbrell gets a hold for his role in this situation. Probably not a very deserved hold, but Keegan Aiken ends up blowing the game. It's 3-3, and we head to extra innings for this. So in the 10th inning, Jorge Mateo started at second, having made the last out, and the Orioles were ineffective offensively in the 10th. Cowser took an immediate strikeout. Really unfortunate in that situation. Of course, he's a lefty. You just want him to pull the ball and get Mateo over to third, but he didn't. He struck out. O'Hearn pinch hit from McCann. In that situation, he walked. Mateo tried stealing third, I think on the 1-0 pitch, but it was fouled off. And who knows if O'Hearn had taken that pitch. I mean, it's, not going to play the what if game. But yeah, Mateo didn't end up getting to third. So O'Hearn pinch hit in that situation. He was able to draw a walk, but then Mullins came up, popped out, and then Gunnar Henderson grounded out. So there was that. Albert Suarez did come in the game this inning, as I said. I feel like too late into the game, but he did come in this inning, and he had a great 10th inning. He got a ground out to third base, which wasn't able to advance the runner from second. He got a fly out to right, and then he struck out Joey Meneses. So neither team scored in the 11th, both stranding the runner placed at second base. Heading to the 11th, Ryan Mountcastle hit a bomb that put the O's up 5-3, but unfortunately, the Nats fought back, clawed back. They made it 5-5. They had the winning run at third. Suarez was pitching this inning. He came in for his second inning. So it was 5-5. They had the winning run at third, and Suarez got CJ Abrams to fly out to center field to keep it tied at 5. And then heading into the 12th inning, Jorge Mateo, so Jordan Westburg was placed on second, and Jorge Mateo singled into left field. And then just sort of a Nationals disaster happens defensively for Washington. Um, and just the ball basically got thrown around. The third baseman fumbled the ball, and then tried throwing the ball to second to get Mateo. I think the fumble sort of encouraged Mateo to take second, although that wasn't fully clear. Um, and then, yeah, the third baseman trying to recover from his mistake compounds the situation, throws it into the outfield. Mateo then took third on the throwing error. So yeah, basically, Mateo slid into third. He appeared to be injured. It wasn't clear what the injury was or why it happened or what it was that hurt him. But he was like walking around for a bit. The trainer came out, Hyde came out, but he did stay in the game. After staying in the game, he immediately scored on a wild pitch. The O's didn't even need to hit him in, and the O's went up 7-5. So for the second time, the Orioles take another 2-run lead in extra innings. Hopefully, the Orioles can actually preserve this win and save this game. So what ends up happening? Jacob Webb ends up coming into the game in the bottom of the 12th. Luis Garcia, first batter up, hits a double, scoring CJ Abrams from second to make it 7-6. So once again, the pressure is back on the Orioles pitching, the Orioles defense. So at that point, Ryan McKenna had come into the game for Anthony Santander, and he took a bad route to the ball in the outfield. I think it could have been playable had he taken a better route to the ball, but he didn't. It turns out to be a double. Of course, there's not going to be any air on that play. He never made contact with the ball, and despite his bad route, he's not going to be, I guess, punished in the scorebooks because of that. But I think it was playable had he taken a better route. Eli had mentioned the last episode, his defense has been not great since he's been up, and I think that was another example of that. So after this double, as I said, pressure's back on the Orioles, but Nick Senzel quickly strikes out, and then Jesse Winker flies out, and then Joey Meneses flew out. So Garcia, after hitting the double, never advanced past second base, and the Orioles fortunately escaped and won 7-6. So the Orioles, so the one thing that is, I think, notable and positive about this game, of course, I do think it's fair to say the Orioles have a better offense, but I think the Nationals had an edge with the bullpen arms coming into the game late in the game. The Nationals have a really solid bullpen at this point, and they've been doing well. But the Orioles were able to find a way to score off them in extra innings, and keep putting the pressure on the Nationals offense in the bottom half of the inning to replicate basically what the Orioles had done. And it took a few tries, but in the 12th inning, the Orioles were able to stay on top permanently and win the game. So Albert Suarez did get the win in the game. Jordan Weems took the loss, and the Orioles split the series 1-1. Okay. So takeaways from this series. I'm not going to do Orioles MVP. I was thinking about it, and no Oriole really, really stood out in a way that uh I think in a way that is really deserving of an MVP. Now I know most of the time, well, over the course of a season or in the World Series, an MVP is assigned no matter what, even if it's pretty evenly split, even if there are three guys and they're all sort of mediocre as far as MVP level people go. One gets assigned in the American League and the National League for the season, and like in the World Series and stuff like this. But I'm going to decline to give one. If you were looking at contenders, you could make a case for Kyle Bradish. You could make a case for Ryan Mountcastle since he hit a big 2-run home run in extra innings. You could make a case for Jorge Mateo. Because he ended up sort of providing the offense that ended up finally winning the game for the Orioles. You could even look at Gunnar Henderson. So there are a few different candidates, but I think nobody really stood out and took the MVP in a way where I'm like, okay, I have to give it to them. So I'm not going to award an Orioles MVP for this series. Big takeaway, of course, is that the Orioles avoid the sweep. So it is now 103 consecutive series the Orioles have gone without being swept. That is, of course, a massive deal. Of course, in the modern era of baseball, the Orioles are the best. Every other team that is above the Orioles for this streak happened in like the early 1900s, or at a bare minimum to the early or mid 1900s. So in this modern era of baseball, this just has not happened. So the fact that this streak is intact and that we did not lose it on a 2-game series feels good. It would have found a little it would have felt a little cheap. Even if it wasn't cheap, it would have felt a little cheap for the Orioles to have lost it in a 2-game series. When the Orioles do eventually lose this streak, I do hope that it is during a 3 or either a 3 or 4-game series, because it will feel fully deserved and fully earned. That okay, this is the time for it to end. But we don't even have to have that conversation because the Orioles did not get swept. So that's one of the big takeaways. The Orioles scratched, clawed. This streak at this point, I'm sure it's in their minds. All the Orioles players are aware of it. And if they're aware of it, they never seem to crack. And they are aware of it. Not if they are aware of it, they are aware of it. But they never crack under the pressure. And in this game, they fought and they fought and they fought, and they were able to win. So that's a really great thing to see. I think it's representative of the resilience basically that this team has, that we've known about, that we've come to love about this team. So second takeaway is that Kyle Bradish looked really good in his second outing back with the Orioles. So really excited about that. Really encouraging. Yeah, like I said, the 9 strikeouts was good. Of course, it could have been a little cleaner at certain moments, but overall, not nothing that we're going to complain about. The stuff was there, especially later in the game, and no complaints. So just nothing but an encouraging start for Kyle Bradish. And then the third takeaway, I have to say, this really stood out to me in the last, especially in the second game. Mullins now did get a hit in the first game, but he went 0 for 5 in the second game, and he really looked lost at the plate, unfortunately. He did not seem to have he didn't seem like he was seeing the ball very well. He chased a lot. He didn't seem to have like a good approach at the plate. And he just did not look good. So Eli had talked about last episode about Anthony Santander and the Orioles trying to get him hot. Mullins is right there with Anthony Santander. The O's are also waiting for Cedric Mullins to get hot and to find it offensively. And then especially if I think Eli said this about Santander last time. If he gets it going offensively, then the Orioles offense is just going to be, another level. But if Santander and if Mullins can get it together offensively, this is going to be a great lineup. Cedric Mullins has been hitting a lot like toward the bottom of the order at this point. He hit 9 in the game today. So I think it not that I mean, don't get me wrong. I do think it's temporary. I don't think it's indicative of a larger problem. We're only a month into the season. He's not hitting great. He does have 6 home runs. So he does have that going for him. He's not hitting great, but yeah, he did not look good in this second and last game here. I did comment a few episodes ago against the Red Sox about how I was hoping he had a really good series there, and I was hoping he had sort of turned a corner offensively. And maybe it's not quite there yet, but we are going to be on the lookout for it. He is still contributing in so many ways. And if he's not really contributing that much offensively at the current moment, it's more than fine for him to hit 8 or 9. And then there's not a lot of pressure on him. And then when he eventually does figure it out offensively, then we can slide him back up to 6th in the order. Or if he really, really has a season like he did a few years ago, maybe even higher than that. Now it's a little more difficult. Where do you put him, especially with Henderson 1 and Rutschman 2? But maybe there is when Mullins is really returns to the form he's really, really capable of, maybe there's a way for him to get in there. But how he's hitting right now, and just to clarify, maybe there is a way for him to hit number 1 or number 2 in the Orioles lineup. But as of now, he's not hitting well. So yeah, it's unfortunate to watch. But hopefully he turns that around. So coming up for the Orioles have 3 at home starting on Friday against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And then we play another 3 against the Toronto Blue Jays. So the Orioles are off on Thursday. It's very nice and convenient for the Orioles. The Orioles used the bullpen especially a lot in game 2. So it's nice that the Orioles have can't even call it a travel day. It's an off day basically, because the Orioles are traveling, quote unquote, from DC to Baltimore. So the Orioles will be able to rest up on Thursday before they play 6 in a row against both the Diamondbacks and the Blue Jays. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Basically, want to let you all know this episode has been presented by Bet Online. Feel free to go give us a rating, a review. Feel free to subscribe to the show on YouTube and like this video. If you have any thoughts on the analysis, please comment. You can also email us if you feel better about expressing yourself via email. You can contact us and email us at thewarehousepod@gmail.com. You can follow us on X and on Instagram at the Warehouse Pod. And other than that, the Orioles have now gone 103 series without a sweep. So we can celebrate that. Thank you so much for listening, and go O's.